My record reaches you out of Mongolia. Destroy, exactly, see? Destroy it, just like that.
Well, Freddie, I knew you were explosive, but not that explosive.
I mean, really.
Did you know you were that explosive?
I can make a bigger bang than that, dear, I'll tell you.
Queen is, without exaggeration, one of the most supremely important rock bands ever assembled. A band who can, without deceit, boast of having #1 singles that were written by each of its 4 original members. A feat that not only puts rock pioneers cum hipster darlings the Beatles to absolute shame, but remains singularly impressive in a modern music industry where Kanye West can't match his own fucking slacks without 15 songwriters. And for all the depictions of Freddie Mercury and his glorified backing band Queen, their most successful single was actually penned by, of all people, the borderline mute bassist John Deacon. They were paired with 2 of the most legendary frontmen in the history of rock, and Adam Lambert, but oh, we'll get to that rant. In case you want to hear it now, as is always the case, the video's description has a timestamp table of contents, so click away to your heart's content, Rageaholics. From arena rock to prog metal to synth pop, this is a band to whom genre definitions mean exactly fuck all, despite their own immutable contributions to all of the above. So curb your fucking expectations and let us pay proper tribute to the quasi-metal majesty that is Queen.
That's right. Just you keep yourself alive.
One of the earliest rules of thumb established here on Mythos has been the curious phenomenon of legendary bands that for some reason begin with their weakest offering. From Judas Priest to Yngwie Malmsteen, it's continued virtually unabated to the present day, until the fuck now. Queen 1 features an unceasing onslaught of some of the most poignant material the band has ever committed to tape, at least 3 of which were being played on stage right up until Freddie Mercury's death, and several of which are still played live by what remains of the band in 2015 with the talentless karaoke pop star who shall not be named on vocals. So let's establish one immutable fact here and now. I could have credibly entitled this episode Metal Mythos Queen, because while Queen are not strictly speaking a metal band, they do have more than a handful of metal songs and even metal albums, and tracks like the standout Great King Rat prove beyond reproach that Queen 1 is among their absolute heaviest.
I told you once before.
I don't give a fuck what section Virgin Megastore decides to stock their albums in. That right there is fucking metal. Queen, a very strong debut. But the ascent had only just begun.
That's when we sort of first really got into production and went completely over the top, you know. There's a track on there called March of the Black Queen. I mean, the tape was literally transparent. The 16-track, 2-inch tape. It was, the oxide was almost completely worn away. We'd gone over it so many times, so many overdubs and bounce downs. It literally was transparent.
This is a savage sophomore siege, every bit as melodic as it is heavy, simultaneously redefining progressive rock and heavy metal with frequent stops in a quiet, retiring little hamlet named Power Metal Junction. Along with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, Queen 2 is arguably one of the pioneering and formative influences of the sword and sorcery side of heavy metal, perhaps no more evident than on the aptly titled Ogre Fucking Battle. How How power metal, you inquire? Well, I could divulge that this song, along with several others on Queen 1 and 2, including the band's first major radio hit, The Seven Seas of Rye, were actually set in the fictitious medieval fantasy world of Rye, created by Freddie Mercury, presumably for some story he was writing on the side. That's right, at one point, Freddie Mercury was writing a goddamn fantasy novel, because life is occasionally just that fucking awesome. Queen 2, though perhaps the single most obscure release of the Queen catalog, has since become both a fan favorite and, no doubt about it, ranks in the highest echelons of my personal power metal pantheon. But storm clouds loom for the Queen cabal during a massively successful North American tour. After blowing everyone off the stage while opening for Mott the Hoople, guitarist and principal writer of well over half the songs on the first two Queen records, fell gravely ill with hepatitis, necessitating the band's abrupt withdrawal. Literally unable to stand, the band somehow snuck the guitar hero through customs and shepherded him back home to England, but while Brian convalesced, that meant the bulk of the writing duties on the next album would fall to frontman Freddie Mercury. We were all about to unwittingly suffer a sheer heart attack.
Just a new man. Yes, you made me live again.
So here's the deal. Brian May is, for the most part, responsible for the heavy side of Queen. While it's true Freddie and Roger contributed some upbeat metal tunes, it was the guitar prodigy in question whose solo work most closely resembles heavy metal, to say nothing of his collaborations with Black Sabbath and Metal Mythos alumni Motorhead and even Yngwie Malmsteen, who by the by happens to be a massive Queen fan. It goes without saying that with Brian on the mend and thus slightly less involved than on previous efforts, 1974's sheer heart attack would be a very different beast. But the Queen faithful weren't quite prepared for just how profoundly different it would be. In one masterstroke, the three remaining members of Queen, bassist John Deacon, drummer Roger Taylor, and it goes without saying the band's other primary songwriter Freddie Mercury, picked up the slack and then some, with one indescribably massive caveat. Show tunes. No, you didn't mishear. Fucking show tunes. With Brian May out of action, Freddie Mercury filled the resultant void with polished power pop, albeit of a fairly high caliber, as personified by the first bona fide mega hit of Queen's budding careers, the infernally catchy Killer Queen. My personal favorite, however, has to be the little-known operatic rocker directed at the band's thieving record company, the antics of which were rapidly coming to a boil, the unfairly forgotten Flick of the Wrist.
Flick of the wrist. It's your dad, baby. Love a kiss. It's your man. Flick of the wrist. He leads your heart out. Digging the ribs. And then a kick in the head. He's stinging it up.
Sheer Heart Attack features Queen's first pronounced overtures towards outright pop, and nowhere is that more evident than the turbo camp of Bring Back Leroy Brown, a full-blown ragtime radio show tune, almost admirable in its utter ridiculousness. It's 200 proof Freddie Mercury. Sheer Heart Attack, while not my personal favorite Queen record, isn't entirely dispossessed of the band's heavy metal roots. A cursory listen to Now I'm Here, Stone Cold Crazy, or the aforementioned Flick of the Wrist proved this beyond reproach, but as a whole, it would lay the radio-friendly foundation to the chart-topping temerity that was to come.
Mama, I killed a man, you know. Wow. Okay, I'm there. What happened? Nothing happened. We all went off singing nonsense. You know, Scaramouche, can you do the fandango? No.
Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me.
As was previously alluded to in the superb Flick of the Wrist, it was around this time that the relationship between Queen and their production company, like a Latina 5 hours after marriage, went pear-shaped. Note that I say production company and not record company. You see, earlier in their careers, Queen had signed with a production company who shopped their albums to record companies, essentially putting a money-leeching middleman where there never should have been one to begin with. A deal that meant that although Queen already had 2 major hits in their native Britain and had toured the world and were rapidly climbing the charts in America as well, they didn't have 2 Buffalo nickels to rub the fuck together. Around the time their manager pulled up in a shiny new Mercedes, Queen not only severed the contract in question, but frontman Freddie Mercury famously lashed out in song.
Kiss my ass goodbye.
Feel good, are you satisfied? Do you feel like suicide?
Is your conscience alright? Does it plague you at night?
Do you feel good?
course, it was only with the advent of the almighty Bohemian Rhapsody, and perhaps just as importantly its groundbreaking promotional video, that the album and the band themselves ascended to the commercial cosmos. A song as catchy as it is operatic, Bohemian Rhapsody, for however many Mountain Dew ads and shitty romantic comedies it's been shamelessly shoved into, is a noteworthy piece of progressive metal, almost single-handedly proving that there was in fact a way to write lengthy, pioneering songs that fused multiple genres and still fucking sold, and doing so nearly a half-decade before bands like Rush and Genesis hopped on the commercial prog rock bandwagon. But it almost didn't. It was only after the song was played in perpetuity by a rock DJ named Kenny Everett, sadly the same man who was indirectly and unintentionally responsible for Freddie Mercury contracting the disease that would ultimately claim his life, that the song embedded itself in pop culture. I'm not gonna bullshit you and claim A Night at the Opera is one of my favorites. I actually find the album as a whole somewhat inconsistent, and those omnipresent fucking show tunes take the listener from rigid to flaccid in half a hummingbird's heartbeat. But for lengthy avant-garde fare like the Prophet's Song, not to mention the juggernaut that is Bohemian Rhapsody, this is arguably the single most important rock album of the 70s all the same. Overrated and underrated all at once. Next.
I love posing. That's for the press.
While it's fair to say that A Day at the Races can't boast epics the caliber of Bohemian Rhapsody, it's also true that A Night at the Opera sure as shit doesn't have any songs as scorchingly savage as Tie Your Mother Down, although admittedly Death on Two Legs comes within a cunt hair. After the pomp and pretense of the preceding effort, 76's follow-up A Day at the Races represented a transparent attempt to put some of the balls and viscera back into the proceedings, and from the outset that's exactly what A Day at the Races provides. Reviled at the time of its initial release, as time has worn on, it's taken its rightful place as one of the strongest releases of the band's career, and absolutely a worthy successor to the band's first breakout album. Whether it's the gospel leanings of Somebody to Love, the baroque badassery of The Millionaire Waltzer, the sludgy blues metal bliss of White Man, which was later to serve as the thematic blueprint for the Iron Maiden standard Run to the Hills, this album is a beast. Even if the outright love song to glorious Nippon Territoriate suffers from a Hannah Menk's caliber Japanese translation errors, it still reigns as one of the band's all-time strongest rock ballads. While there's the odd instance of filler, and the overall A Day at the Races flows far better as a cohesive album than does A Night at the Opera, with just a dash of that heavy metal grit that fell by the wayside on Sheer Heart Attack and its sequel. A rousing recommendation and a testament to its time, but those times, they were a-changin', and so the fuck were Queen.
Only Queen could come up with the title We Are the Champions. I mean, where's the modesty gone?
Well, there isn't any.
After a glam rock explosion in the early part of the decade, by the mid-70s the pendulum had swung in the opposite direction. In short order, a revolution that kicked off in America, deal with it Britain, the Ramones were first, suddenly washed on English shores, and the punk rock reformation had officially begun. Its lo-fi ethos, aided by a music press that then as now was nothing but a gaggle of hipster shitbags laboring in vain to remain 5 minutes ahead of the cool curve.
We were taking, if you like, music icons at that time, and we were rubbishing them, basically.
Coming in a direct conflict with the pageantry and polish of classic Queen, but they were locked and loaded with their least frilly, bombastic collection of street-level rock anthems to date. The resultant News of the World album, along with fellow 70s rock pioneers Kiss, helped unwittingly create the entire genre of arena rock as a result. Indeed, stadium-bound anthemic fare like We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You is still routinely blasted from speakers at football stadiums stadiums the world over, and it's time to just admit that they always will be. But stripping away the catchy radio tunes, nowhere was the raw edge of Queen more evident than on my personal favorite, the borderline punk Sheer Heart Attack, a song written for the album of the same name, but for whatever reason never included. With News of the World, Queen had definitively proven that they could be of their time just as easily as they could be ahead of it, establishing the band as an indelible commercial foursome who were not going fucking anywhere in the near future, which, considering what came next, was probably for the best.
Don't stop me, 'cause I'm having a good time, having a good time. I'm a shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger, defying the laws of gravity.
However well regarded they are in the present, if there's one consistent theme throughout Queen's early career, it's their adversarial relationship with the press, perhaps nowhere more explicitly depicted than the Rolling Stone magazine review of the Jazz album, during which, believe it or not, tight instrumentation and polished production are used as pejoratives, which by the by goes a long way to explaining this hipster rag's unwavering appreciation for fucking dubstep in 2015. They go on to bash Freddie for writing the album opener Mustafa. Mustafa is merely a clumsy and pretentious rewrite of Hernando's Highway, says reviewer Dave Marsh, which has about as much to do with Middle Eastern culture as street corner souvlaki. He said to Freddie Mercury, a man of Iranian heritage born in fucking Zanzibar? Ah, Rolling Stone magazine. Gotta love those ethnic authenticity critiques that were assembled in an editorial room that's more white than Edgar Winter, fully nude in a blizzard. Listen, slick, unless your middle name is Ahmed, I'm thinking it's unlikely Dave Marsh is acquainted with the monetary value of a fucking goat either, which isn't to suggest that the Jazz album is perfect. It's a slightly schizophrenic, non-committal affair, albeit one that boasts ageless classics like Bicycle Race and the impossibly infectious Don't Stop Me Now, but as seems the standard with Queen, the finest gems only become apparent when you actually dig deeper into the track listing. In this case, the unceasing onslaught of Dead on Time, a searing speedway symphony with more starts, stops, and time changes than a Sony alarm clock.
Time, leave on time, you're never gonna minute, no, you're never gonna minute, no, you're never gonna oh, no matter who, got no business, hang around and tell lies.
Is it in the same master class as its predecessors? Absolutely not, particularly given the muddy production quality, which lets down even the most memorable of tracks, but for all the top 40 classes it ultimately spawned, it was an obscure dance-oriented track entitled Fun It that truly portended the band's short-term future. The 80s were on the horizon, and Queen had answered the clarion call of funk.
I mean, I look at some of my pictures, and I think, oh no, how could you have done that, you know? I remember when I had long hair with black fingernails and gloves over here, and I looked like a real tart.
Gonna level with you guys here. There exists certain bands that for years, even decades, I've sworn up, down, left, and right that I despise with a flagrant acrimony traditionally reserved for 4chan's user base. Until one day, as if by accident, I wake up and discover that I own every single one of their albums. I experienced this exact phenomenon with the subject of Metal Mythos number 2, Yngwie Malmsteen, but my very first experience with it was with Queen. Why hate Queen, you might inquire? Well, as you may have divined from my episode devoted to the unflagging monolith that is Motorhead, I respect consistency, and I say this as a fan, but Queen would have played fucking polka music if it got him paid in the 80s, and don't pretend for 1/70th of a second that isn't the God's honest truth. Love them, but they were out to make some cold hard cash. Nothing wrong with that, especially back when the music industry could actually support such avarice, but most other bands were a bit less brazen when grabbing for the cash. With Queen, they had no illusions about why they recorded Radio Gaga. It was synth pop because synth pop was popular, and The Game is the beginning of this ethos. So no, I don't like The Game, not because it isn't metal. Hell, Dragon Attack is heavy, and in case you weren't aware, I devoted an entire episode to Michael Jackson, for fuck's sake. I'm not a heavy metal or no metal at all, wimps and posers leave the hall type asshole. But this record, a small handful of relevant hits excluded, is unevenly divided between listenable pop and half-hearted dog shit. It's flirting with dance-oriented disco, hard rock, and heavy metal, but refuses to commit to any of the above. I said it to Priest, and now I'm saying it to Queen. Pick a fucking lane, Grandpa. We're tired of looking at your musical turn signal. Next.
Gordon's alive?
Let's be real, this soundtrack is the best thing about this remorseless shit piece of a fucking film. I won't linger over much, because while later film collaborations between Queen and Brian May aired more on the side of album than OST, Flash Gordon is full-blown soundtrack mode. For fuck's sake, there's nearly 20 tracks, and all but 2 of them are subtle variations on the same goddamn theme. But what a fucking theme. When the band were initially approached with the idea, they threw themselves into their work for about a day and a half before 3/4 of the band lost interest, leaving Brian May to complete the album virtually all by himself. Is it any wonder that Brian May has been called on to compose several film and television soundtracks in the intervening decades? But as soundtracks go, Flash is no fucking slouch and would lay the groundwork for superior film efforts down the road. But the next proper Queen album was fast materializing, and for all Flash's metallic bluster, the band were headed in a very different direction.
For what it's worth, we're gonna do a few songs in the funk black category, whatever you call it. That doesn't mean we've lost our rock and roll feel, okay? I mean, it's only a bloody record. People get so excited about these things.
On paper, 1982's Hot Space album should have worked. It features the same basic fusion of rock, funk, R&B, and disco as Michael Jackson's masterpiece Thriller, and it dropped 6 months before the album in question. Ponder that for a moment, Rageaholics. If matters had taken a different turn, the album widely regarded as Queen's worst could have very likely traded places with the best-selling album of all time. I already discussed in Music Mythos Michael Jackson just how profoundly influential Queen's slick fusion of funk, disco, and rock on Another One Bites the Dust had been to a young king of pop. Michael remained a Queen fan all of his life, but during the formative period between Off the Wall and Thriller, when Michael was looking for a new sound to establish the sonic iconography of what would become pop music, he was not only fascinated by the band's most successful #1 single, he also was the reason they were ultimately convinced to fucking release it.
And he loved Freddie, and he kept saying, "You guys, you gotta put that song out." And I wasn't particularly enamored with it, so I said, "No, you're kidding, it's never a single."
But I think the reason Thriller succeeds where Hot Space fails is because Thriller is a completely unified effort, whereas Hot Space is the sound of a band divided. Roger Taylor and Brian May hated this fucking album and were not shy in private or in interviews of giving free rein to their contempt.
So there might be a couple of songs come out that you really don't like very much. I could name a couple.
On the whole, though, I enjoy Hot Space for every reason I despised its predecessor, whereas The Game and even Jazz seemed like an exploitative amalgamation of any and all genres that could conceivably get Queen paid. Hot Space is at a minimum a completely uniform exercise in dance-oriented disco, and when it works, the highlights are superb, like a song that sounds like a lost foundling from the Thriller sessions, the sparse funk rock of Back Chat. Tell me that doesn't sound like something MJ could have easily cranked out in the early 80s. Fuck, replace that wimpy Paul McCartney ballad with Back Chat and that record is goddamn perfect. But Hot Space, for all its virtues, fucking ain't. Take the listless Calling All Girls, for instance, a song only marginally less ridiculous than its accompanying music video.
It was just meant to be really a pop song, you know, about love, calling all girls, calling all boys around the world, and I don't see what it's got to do with fucking robots, to be honest, but...
Hot Space, a cataclysmic failure, but a daring one that boldly subverts its audience's expectations, and a record I appreciate more with each subsequent spin. Essential 80s pop.
Are you ready?
Sometimes it's nice to actually sort of break away from a group that's actually been going for so long, meaning staying away.
With pervasive infighting turning recording studios into war zones and frontman Freddie Mercury's rock star lifestyle spiraling out of control, not to mention Hot Space going up like a hot fart in church, by 1983, Queen had unofficially broken up, during which Roger Taylor and Freddie Mercury both recorded solo material. John Deacon did production work, while guitar god Brian May collaborated with Eddie Van Halen and dozens of other famous rock musicians on the staggering Starfleet project. But a year later, the fearsome foursome were back in the studio with newly recharged batteries and a dogged determination to erase the previous album's mistakes. When Roger Taylor, responding to a question of what the musical style of the album should be, responded by saying, "We're gonna give them the works," the album had found its title, and that frankly describes the album as well as anything. Like the game before it, The Works is a musical potpourri, and again, like the game, to me, it comes off as a bit of a cash grab as well. From synth pop a la Another One Bites the Dust, to 50s acoustic rock a la Crazy Little Thing Called Love, it seems The Works is structured from top to bottom to essentially clone their past success with the game. It's only when Queen lets the blood fly with some outright rock that The Works elevates above the album it aspires to be. It's songs like Hammer to Fall and Tear It Up that make this an album worth checking out, and I tend to believe it isn't an accident that the next 4 Queen albums would grow heavier and more metallic with each successive iteration. A middling album for an uncertain period, but the ground beneath Queen's collective feet was about to grow shakier still.
There's been a lot of rumors lately about a certain band called Queen. The rumors are that we're going to split up. What do you think? They're talking from here. So forget those rumors, we're gonna stay together until we fucking will die, I'm sure.
The period following the release of The Works was rife with uncertainty and speculation. All 4 members had tried their hands at solo projects, none of which could be credibly described as a resounding success. Freddie Mercury's long-anticipated solo album, Mr. Bad Guy, had been preceded by a colossal record contract with an even larger advance than was traditionally afforded new Queen albums, and it went over like a bag of dry leaves at a Great White concert. Rumors also began to swirl around this time of some of Freddie's former lovers and confidants, both male and female, contracting or passing away from the AIDS virus, touching off what would prove to be long-standing tabloid conjecture about the Queen frontman's health. Coupled with the fact that Queen had only produced 2 proper albums in half a decade, and one of them was a resounding flop, this led to a popular consensus that the band was teetering on the edge of a breakup, and then Live Aid happened. The British press has no shortage of superlatives in describing Queen's performance at Live Aid, but the short version, they stole the fucking show, down to the fillings in their teeth, after which the sluggish sales of The Works suddenly jolted to life. Energized and newly united, Queen entered the studio and cranked out some of the finest music they produced in the entirety of the 1980s, a record that doubled as the soundtrack to the very first Highlander film, A Kind of Magic. Those lamenting the dreaded S word, not to worry, A Kind of Magic is is just as much a Queen album as it is a soundtrack, and this time, the entire band were invested in the final product, yielding an optimal result, albeit an understandably lopsided one. But for metalheads like myself, the album also marked a welcome return to the metallic, perfectly encapsulated by the 10-ton attack of the unfairly maligned Gimme the Prize.
No escape from my authority.
But the downside is low enough to play tetherball with Clint Eastwood's nuts. Queen had re-emerged. They were reformed, refueled, and reconstituted, and punctuated by their most successful world tour ever, it seemed immortality was all but guaranteed. But even as he departed the stage for a final time at a double sellout in Nebworth Park in '86, Freddie Mercury already knew he was living with a death sentence.
I just got the vibe from Freddie. He felt that he wasn't maybe able to do anymore. I think he had an idea that he might not be terribly well.
Do you ever worry that you could end up lonely, rich, and that you could end up a lonely, rich old man when you're 70?
No, because I've answered before. Because I will be dead long before that. I'll tell you.
Do you think so? Why do you think that?
Well, I'll tell you what. I can answer that when I am 70. If you're still around, dear.
Why shouldn't I be?
Because I won't be there. Oh, darling, I'll be dead and gone, dear. I'll be fucking starting a new life somewhere else, dear.
How much the band knew of their singer's declining health heading into the recording of The Miracle is a matter of debate. There was even a little noise in 1988 about the possibility of 2 gigs to take place in the Netherlands. Whatever the rumors, they were put to bed when some way into the recording of The Miracle, Freddie Mercury finally revealed to his bandmates that he was dying of AIDS.
We kind of knew for a long time, very, very gradually, because the signs began to be there. And there just came a day when he said, look, you probably figured out what I'm dealing with.
And he just sort of told us, you know, the absolute facts, the facts that we were really starting to realise anyway. And really that produced a coming together, a closing of the ranks.
And it's a good thing the ranks did close, because the British press descended like the vultures they are. Adding further chum to the shark-infested waters, Brian May's affair with a popular British soap actress led to the collapse of his marriage at around the same time, making Queen front-page tabloid news for nearly the entirety of 1988 and 9. But from great adversity comes great art, and so, inspired by both Freddie's and Brian's struggles, in my opinion, the best track on the album, Scandal, was born.
Here come the bad news. Open the floodgates, then leave us bleeding. We say you cheapskates. Over and over and over again.
It's a slick bit of synth metal, both of and transcendent relative to its time, and remains wildly underrated even by the bands themselves, and only appreciates in relevance with time. But virtually all material on The Miracle is of staggeringly high caliber. The band, though not completely shed of 80s dancecraft, stripped down for a more organic hard rock heavy metal sound, immortalized by modern anthems like I Want It All and the title track. For the first time in the band's history, all music on The Miracle, rather than being credited to a single member, would be credited to all 4 equally, simultaneously incentivizing collaboration and cultivating a more comfortable studio atmosphere that resulted in an album that is, in my estimation, one of the 2 best pieces of music Queen ever recorded. If The Miracle had in fact been the last thing the band ever released, as Freddie's doctors informed him at the time it likely would be, it still would have served as a fitting epitaph to a storied rock band. Instead, it's Queen's strongest effort of the 80s, bar none. Powerful, heavy, overlooked, but most importantly, recommended.
There's only 2 bastions of the old British Empire left. One is the Queen Mary, which you're having this party on, and the other one is us, which you have just delightfully bought. So we're thrilled to be with you and look forward to a great and sparkling future under the Disneyland, or should I say Hollywood, sign.
Good luck,
Take care.
Hollywood.
Bye.
Bye.
Maybe once more. Oh shit, all that crap again?
As the 90s dawned with touring out of the question, Queen chained themselves to the recording studio once again, made all the more lucrative an endeavor by their freshly signed record contract with Hollywood Records, a division of Disney. What emerged was the best album Queen ever recorded. A darksome masterpiece with an ingenious title. Innuendo reconnected the band with its heavy metal roots while exploring everything from gospel to psychedelic introspection to AOR, but boasting a consistency that its predecessors, even the superb Miracle, lacked in places. But it all plays second fiddle to the shocking metallic brilliance of a contemporary classic, The Show Must Go On. The song often misinterpreted as being Freddie Mercury's goodbye to the fans, the song was in fact written by Brian May. Freddie's goodbye was actually featured on The Miracle, and it's the scorching album closer, Was It All Worth It?
Was it all worth it? Was it all worth it? Yes, it was a worthwhile experience.
That's what's so striking about Innuendo. By this time, Freddie was over it. He had accepted his fate and was utterly absorbed in the process of enjoying and living every moment he had left, which, given that he was supposed to die in '88, yet somehow managed to last until '91, was clearly the prudent course. Innuendo isn't the sound of Freddie coming to grips with his mortality, it's the sound of Queen saying goodbye to their friend. And what a farewell. In fact, Brian May was afraid at first, given Freddie's critically fading health, that he wouldn't be able to sing The Show Must Go On. To which the frontman responded, I'll fucking do it, propped himself up on the desk, knocked back a vodka, and proceeded to nail the fuck out of it in one take.
Show must go on. I'll face it with a grin. I'm never giving in. I'm in the show.
With a 4-octave vocal performance that in Brian May's own words sounded like a laser through crystal, it's a testament to Freddie Mercury's boundless courage and determination that he managed to rock harder on Innuendo than on any of the band's previous material, to record one of the finest music videos of the band's career, to write possibly the most metal Queen song to that point with The Hitman. In short, Freddie Mercury was 10 times the creative force months removed from his untimely demise than most musicians are in perfect health. When whatever the fuck is up there punches my Wonka ticket in the mortality lottery, I can only pray I face it with 1/5 the courage and defiance and dignity of Freddie Mercury. Innuendo, a sublime, perfect epitaph. Buy it.
I don't really think about, my God, when I'm dead, are they going to remember me? I don't really think about it. It's up to them. When I'm dead, who cares? I don't.
After a lengthy sabbatical to mourn and pursue solo projects, the 3 remaining members of Queen reincorporated to complete the final music recorded in Freddie Mercury's lifetime. These are songs which Freddie demanded be recorded without music because his condition had by that point in 1991 deteriorated to the extent that he simply did not have the luxury of waiting for it to be done. So the band effectively lived in their recording studio in Montreux, slaving away and awaiting Freddie's call to let him know he was having one of his better days and could make it down to record vocals. The problem? Only 3 songs were really recorded, and one didn't even have a musical idea attached to it, so the remainder was filled out with, frankly, table scraps. Songs left over from previous records, remixes of Freddie's solo material, albeit really good ones, recorded as they perhaps always should have been, with John, Brian, and Rodgers' instrumentation on top, and then, of course, there's Mother Love, his final song. One that begins, understandably, given Freddie's condition at this time, in subdued fashion, a slow, somber build in a far lower vocal register than Queen listeners were accustomed to hearing. Given his gravelly tone, you're tempted to believe that, you know, this being recorded by a man literally in his final extremity, he'll continue that way, delivering a sort of down-paced ballad, and no one at all would fault him for doing that. And then out of nowhere, a man months from his demise, of all things an opportunistic respiratory infection, suddenly erupts into one of the single most impressive vocal passages he ever recorded in life.
Out in the city, in the cold world outside, I don't want pity, just a safe place to hide. Mama, please, let me back inside.
The song continues, and for a moment the band sort of plays on without him, like if you're watching a band live and someone's mic accidentally gets cut off, but the band sort of awkwardly fumbles on without him, waiting until the problem is remedied. And then there's this heartbreaking moment where the final verse comes in and it isn't Freddie. It's Brian May's voice. Because Freddie Mercury passed away in the middle of making this song. Whatever I may think about the somewhat uneven final product of Made in Heaven, Mother Love remains one of the single most haunting moments in the history of music. Striking, somewhat uneven, far less uniform, and in the overall inferior to Innuendo, but absolutely worth a listen. For over a decade, Queen lay dormant. By the late 90s, bassist John Deacon had formally retired from the band and from music, leaving drummer Roger Taylor and guitarist Brian May standing lone vigil at the helm. But then a chance collaboration on a charity single changed the fuck out of all that.
Let's just get on with it and take a look at who's in it. Fuck me, it's Queen! And Paul Rodgers! First coming album. It's only Queen and Paul Rodgers with Celebrity!
The way I feel is that when somebody new takes somebody's place, it's just everything's got to be new. And so this was a completely new chemical reaction, and it had to have a new meaning and a new title and everything.
Many bands of any pedigree have the opportunity to work with one legendary vocalist, let alone two. But in 2005, that's exactly what happened when Queen hooked up with possibly the greatest living frontman in rock, Paul Rodgers, best known for his time fronting Free, Bad Company, and The Firm, and whose music is probably being played in a half-dozen television commercials and films even as I record this goddamn video. In theory, it was a perfect marriage, and to anyone at all with ears, that's exactly what it was. So it was no surprise at all when 2008 yielded the band's first album of all new material in 13 years, The Cosmos Rocks. Now let's get this the fuck out of the way right off the bat. Queen plus Paul Rodgers is not Queen, and it isn't trying to be. Paul Rodgers never aspired to replace Freddie. It's a side project. Neither did the bands themselves want to replace Freddie. What we have here is balls-out blues rock with a few of those metallic Queen frills, and it fits like a glove. I'll never forget working in a record store when this album dropped, reading some review that was just unleashing the Kraken on this shit, calling it everything but a child of God. So naturally, when the promo CD showed up, I was eager to throw it in the stereo. And then myself and everyone in the store were positively blown away. It wasn't quite Queen, but the old magic was just brooding just beneath the surface. And Paul Rodgers is Paul fucking Rodgers. This man is arguably the entire reason rock and metal have license to experiment with blues, R&B, and funk, and one of my favorite vocalists who I spoke about at length in Metal Mythos #2, the great Göran Edman, is often favorably compared to the man. He's influenced Glenn Hughes, Don Dokken, and hundreds of others, and his voice only seems to improve with age. A seemingly effortless delivery that's spotlighted on one of my personal favorite tracks, Still Burnin'.
What a shame. shame, shame, shame. But I don't want and I don't need to play the crying game. Music lights is flaming me.
Though it's not all sunshine and roses, as evidenced by the glorified Barack Obama campaign song, We Believe. Look, one of the reasons early Queen is classic is because they deferred from this kind of strident socio-political pulpiteering.
We need a hero to step boldly from the shadows. Yeah, you believe there must be someone on the scene that fits the bill.
You'd need a deli slicer to get political messages any more thinly veiled than this.
I don't like to write message songs because I'm not sort of politically orientated. I'm not like a John Lennon or a Stevie Wonder. I don't want to change the world. I don't want to talk about peace or any kind of sort of political content because I just don't feel I'm motivated that way.
That rather glaring misstep aside, the Cosmos do indeed rock, and so the fuck should you. Of course, with Paul Rodgers preferring solo work and ultimately reforming Bad Company, the partnership was never destined for permanence. Enter Adam Lambert. Alright, let's do this. Queen, perhaps more than any other band in existence, deserves a better class of fan than this Corden collective of pin the tail on the preteen cliche that mistakenly refer to themselves as Queen fans when they only ever fucking listen to the same 10 top 40 fare in perpetuity. Oh, what's that, Tory? You're the biggest Queen fan in the world, are ya? Love the shit out of Bohemian Rhapsody, do ya? Spectacular. Please do regale us all with your Oxford Roundtable interpretation of the lyrics in a song that Freddie Mercury himself went on record as saying were comprised of fucking meaningless gibberish. This is a fan base that reviled Paul Rodgers, who for the record didn't even technically join Queen or replace Freddie Mercury, who was also a living legend who influenced and was idolized by, guess who? Freddie fucking Mercury, yet your vaginas are so moist by the sight of that talentless karaoke pop star Adam Lambert, the fucking dew point jumps by 5 digits. At least when Paul Rodgers tore into his inimitable rendition of The Show Must Go On, his bluesy R&B influenced timbre necessitated that he made it his own, whereas the pharaoh of fake vibrato Adam Lambert overtly tries to sound like Freddie Mercury and winds up sounding like someone taking a dirt devil to a dyspeptic goat. And Alice Cooper called asshat. He'd like his bed of nails jacket back, you primping, tremulous douchebag. You can pose on all the Michael Jackson sofas you like, unless there's some talent stuffed between the cushions. Get the fuck off the stage. Whew. But let's not allow one chewy bit to spoil the roast, shall we? With or without that preening, self-important lounge singer, Queen are icons, a musical institution that I can only hope will subsist for many a year to come. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I thoroughly enjoyed making it, until I once again emerge from the mists of the mythos. I'm RazörFist. God fucking speed!
White man, don't you see the light behind your black skies?
Oh, what's he doing? Roger, what did you do?